Do you think everybody can be a healer?
Great question. I feel like we all have it within us, but it's a matter of, are we willing to tap in and do the work to step into that? So if you have the gift, any gift, whether it's you're a healer, a channeler, psychic, transmuter, Akashic records, there's lots of gifts. But I look at gifts as frequency based, and that's the checks and balances, and that's amazing, to where depending on your frequency, you can access a certain version of your gift. To where, let's say somebody's a transmuter, they walk through the world and they can feel somebody's energy and not know what they're doing, and they can cleanse somebody's energy unconsciously, and that person walks away feeling lighter. And that person, as a transmuter, depending on what their frequency is, if it's a little bit lower, then they might get tired and they might feel all the pain and trauma that person's feeling because they're transmuting it through their system. But if their frequency was higher, they wouldn't feel a thing. It would happen fast, they wouldn't feel a thing, and it would be normal. Same thing with psychics. If your frequency is low and you're in a fear-based, shame-based frequency, then you are tapped into everything psychically that's on that frequency. And it's not fun, it's a nightmare almost. But when you go higher, you get the flip side of that. Everyone I met personally have either had gifts that are overactive, dormant, or happening on autopilot, and they don't know it's happening. And dormant ones are the hard ones at times because they've got to choose it. They've got to be open to it. You can bring a horse to water, but there's all you can do. For me, that's been a tough one in the past because I want to save everybody, I want to help everybody, I want to elevate everybody, and realizing sometimes even the hardest ones are the ones who are closest to you. Sometimes you can't. All you got to do is embody the best version of you and hope, and it does happen a lot, that since they're connected to you, by you working on you, it affects them as well.
We hear a lot right now about empaths and highly sensitive people. And I think personally, everyone is an empath, except that they don't realize they are. They feel too much, and so they suppress it, they dumb it down. But you have some tips that you offer to people to protect their energy, because it must be really hard.
It is, because people are, I used to call it sensitive to energy, but the thing is with empath is there's always different versions of gifts. I've seen empaths who really are healers, who really are transmuters. The way I see it, there are times to where when somebody wakes up to their energetic ability, and sometimes we never predict when our third eye opens. And third eye doesn't mean you're seeing ghosts. Third eye can just mean that for some reason now that's open to where you're sensing everybody's energy, and it's overwhelming. Because the thing is with empaths, there's a point of overwhelm. It can happen when you're in a crowded area, when you're in your house, you feel great, go in a crowded area, you're like, what's going on? You're overwhelmed, you are thrown off your zen. And I thought it was just being out there. I could have somebody think of me. I would be going on my day, like this is over 10 years ago, I would go on my day, and all of a sudden I would have this anxiety about something, about health, about bills, or something like that. I'm like, this is not mine. There's nothing in my environment that points that I should have this, but I'm feeling it. I trained myself to ask, okay, whose is this? Is this even mine? And I'm like thinking, who is this? Whose is this? 5 minutes later, I get a call from my mom, and she's worried about health or something. Or she was typing an email or a text. So that happens once, you're like, okay, it's kind of odd. I felt their emotion, their frequency before it even happened, but then guess what? If it keeps on happening over and over again, next thing you know, it's probably happened thousands of times to where it becomes undeniable. You feel something and then it happens afterwards. There's a lag time. You feel energetically, but then it happens. Then you start thinking like, wow, there's something happening here, invisible. I don't have to be in a crowded location, in a concert or a mall or an airport to feel overwhelmed. It can happen remotely as well. First of all, knowing that energy can travel that way was huge. And then the second part is like, yes, there are protection and there's different ways you can do it. I used to be really, really into crystals. I still am in a way, to where I would wear anything black. So either a smoky quartz, dark crystal, or a black tourmaline. And I would always make sure that I had citrine next to it. Citrine carries the energy of the sun, and it's one of the few crystals that you don't have to cleanse it. It's self-clearing, so anything that touches it, it can clear that crystal as well. So there was a time where, yeah, I would be wearing that so that instead of me being affected by that person, it will go to this crystal first. It gets to a point, if it's an intense situation, the crystal gets overwhelmed and it overflows to you. Now you don't have to feel it, but it's a buffer. So I learned that, and then I learned how to do shields. Shields work. Like, you put shields around you, and I had this one gal that came to one of my workshops, and I remember when she came to one of my workshops, I remember her so well from several years ago, because for 15 years, she hasn't been able to do a grocery store run by herself. She would go in the grocery store, go down the first aisle, stop, midway through get so overwhelmed with everybody's energy, and she would go home and a friend would have to finish her grocery for her. And that was her life for 15 years. And went to one of my workshops and I taught how to do shields, and she learned that. And then I heard back from her 30 days later and she's like, Oliver, I did my first grocery store run in 15 years and I felt nothing. And for some, it's bringing their power back to where they do shields and then it protects them. But ultimately, nowadays, I work more on my vibration because it's a longer term solution. So the way I look at it is, if somebody is running or on a bike and somebody really wanted to hurt them, somebody can throw a rock or a ball and it would hit that person because they're in that field and they're reachable with a throw. So it will affect that person. They're the same wavelength. But if that same person went on a plane and the plane took off, it will reach a certain altitude to where that person on the ground can still see the plane, and it will reach a certain altitude to where it doesn't matter if that person on the ground is the strongest person and they threw that really, really hard. It doesn't matter. It will reach a certain height to where that rock or ball can't touch the plane. And the person on the plane won't even know that something was attempting. But then there's another one where you go even higher to where the plane isn't even visible to the naked eye. You can't see it. So the person below won't even attempt because they can't even see the plane, and the person above won't even know that exists. And that's kind of like how I like to address protection. Ultimately, long-term is as you raise your vibration, you don't need protection. That's kind of like my end goal that I've worked on and I've taught people. But at the beginning, it is the protection. Once you absorb that energy, learning how to clear that so you can function throughout the day and you're not always overwhelmed and operating from a state of survival and panic all the time. So yeah, it's super important.